To have Mr. Josh Davies for today's session. I have been his audience a couple of times in past. I remember this year in January, I was part of his session in CEREC. Josh is joining us from Las Vegas. And he's been extremely kind. He's taking this session at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, right? So it's early morning for him. Or have I said it?
Arun, I hate to correct you. It's actually 5 in the morning here.
God bless. So thank you so much. I think you've been extremely kind. So, all the ladies and gentlemen, all the amazing educators, we have someone who's taking a session at 5 a.m. in the morning. So, thank you so much, Josh. Josh is the CEO of Center for Work Ethic Development. His organization is committed to developing workplace skills in the global workforce. I have actually personally, as I said, I've been in an audience. I've also personally benefited from one of his training programs, which is Bring Your A Game, right? Mr. Davies has been recognized by a number of organizations like Global Forum for Education and Learning, Training Magazine for his contributions to the training space for development of individual human capital all across. Since all of you are fully aware of the scope of today's session, I will now invite Mr. Davies to take the center stage and guide us all. Thank you so much and welcome, Mr. Davies.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Arun, and thank you all for joining me here on this virtual session. One of the things that's made this past year somewhat bearable has been the expansion of the global network of abilities to meet with people and to share with people in ways that we maybe didn't before. Zoom meetings have become the norm, and it allows us to expand our role and do some things differently than we've done in the past. So I'm excited to get a chance to be with you virtually from Las Vegas, and I'm glad to know it's a wonderful evening there. It is a beautiful morning here, though the sun is not yet up. So with that, let's get started. I want to tell you a little bit more about us. Now, as we look to the future, what we need to know is how do we better prepare our students? And that's really the goal of everything that we're doing, right? We're trying to figure out how to get career education to become a norm, to really focus on not just getting students through education, but getting them prepared. And as we look at a post-COVID world, what are the skills necessary to help our students compete, not just locally, but globally? Those are the things I want to help address, because that's what we do at the Center for Work Ethic Development. Really, we're focused more than anything else on helping people gain employment. We partner with more than 750 different organizations around the world, helping people develop the skills in their students to make them successful in the future. Because we know that employment is the key to not only self-sufficiency, but self-worth. There's a certain value you get when you put in a good day's work that you can't get anywhere else. And that, for us, is where our passion lies. At the Center for Work Ethic Development, we become a global clearinghouse for information and research around employment and employers. What we realized is one of the challenges in academia is that we spend a lot of time in our own world. And what we need to do sometimes is get outside and take a look at what the real world outside of our walls is demanding. So with that, we've started to really share a lot of different research in different areas. I want to start this morning, this afternoon, and evening with a very interesting study. This was done with employers globally, asking them a very simple question. When you are hiring someone for a brand new role, a new position, what is the most important skill or attribute for that candidate to have? And this study was done with more than 1,500 hiring managers over 4 years. So over that time, you got to see how their attitudes shifted every single year. And that did indeed take place. Some of them went higher, some of them went lower. They ranked them from most important to least important each year for those 4 years. Now, what's interesting, on the screen here in front of you, you'll see 6 of the choices that they had to choose from every year. And while I said they all went up and down, what's interesting is that the number one most important skill or attribute never changed. Also, interestingly enough, the least important never changed. Everything else in the middle kind of went up and down. So here's what I'd like you to do. If you could, on the screen here in front of you, you'll see 6 of the choices that employers had every single year: attitude, education, specific skills, job experience, work ethic, and work history. One of those is what employers told us was the most important skill or attribute. And one of them is what they said was the least important. So what I'd like you to do is, in your chat window, let's start with the least important. Which of these 6 skills or attributes do you think employers said was the least important when making a hiring decision? All right, type in your answers in the chat window. Which of these 6 do you think employers said was the least important? All right, we got some answers coming in here fast and furious now. All right. Specific skills, education, work history, job experience, work history. Well, work history is getting a lot of this. Job experience, work history. All right, take about another 5 to 10 seconds here. Work history. Okay, interesting. Okay, so a lot of you are in either the job experience or the work history. And certainly we hear that from a lot of employers, right? Work history is not nearly as important as it once was. Specific skills, job experience, these are all things that we sometimes feel like employers aren't looking for. And those are typically very low in the study. But those were not the ones that employers said were the least important. Interestingly enough, for 4 years in a row, what employers told us was the least important skill or attribute when making a hiring decision. It was education. What? So you're telling me that the guy you have to come speak to a bunch of educators just told you that education isn't important? And that's how I start off? No, it is not that at all. It's not that education isn't important. What employers are telling us is that education is now a price of entry. Education is what you have to even get considered. Education no longer separates one candidate from another because they wouldn't even get the opportunity if they didn't have that education. Okay. Well, if we know that education is, simply put, the least important, what then do you suppose employers say was the most important? Which are the ones that are remaining? Attitude, specific skills, work experience, work ethic, and work history. Which one of those do you think employers said was the most important? All right, we got a lot of different answers coming in here. Most of them are split between work ethic and attitude. Work ethics, attitude, job experience, work ethic, specific skills. All right, any other last guesses here? Work ethic. All right. Well, oftentimes we think that maybe skills that employers are hiring for, attitude, but what employers have told us is that what they're looking for is work ethic. Work ethic was seen as the single most important skill or attribute a job candidate could have that would separate them from the pack, that would determine whether or not that person was selected for a particular position. Work ethic, then, is a critical skill. But here's what we know. Life has changed. Over the last 18 months, we know that things are not the same as they once were. Right? The global pandemic has changed everything. And so in order to prepare our students for this new future, what I'd like to do is go back in time. We're going to go ready for the future. I want to take you back, all the way back in time to January 1st, 2020. Do you remember January 1st of 2020? It was a new day, a new era, a new year, a new decade. And then everything changed. If you remember, there was so much uncertainty, right? We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but the global pandemic changed everything, right? We had lockdowns, we had business disruptions, we had educational disruptions, right? Globally, what did we see? Almost 1.4 billion with a B, youth impacted by the shutdown of education in one way, shape, or form, right? We know that this is a huge impact on our kids, but it wasn't just education that had an impact, right? It was also work. And globally, South Asia had one of the worst impacts of this, right? If you look overall between Asia and Pacific, right, we saw more and more people impacted, working fewer hours. The shutdowns impacted lots of folks. In fact, recently, the State of the Global Workforce study came out by Gallup, and they studied people all over the globe in terms of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and how it impacted them. And South Asian adults, almost half of them, said that they had been affected by the coronavirus situation a lot. That was more than any other region of the world. Yeah, we were impacted more. And, this feels like a lot of different ways that it could impact us. But one of the things that we need to know as we move forward is that it is starting to get better, right? Arun and I were talking about sort of the second wave there, and things are getting a little better. And we know that the vaccines are coming, and that when they do, they have a significant impact, right? If you look at the countries where the vaccination rates are high, employment is starting to come back, right? Unemployment levels in India reached the highest levels ever recorded last year. But we know as the virus gets under control, as vaccinations come, hiring will start again. Here's an example. Here in America, where we've had a significant number of people who've gotten vaccinated, we've seen the employment market change. We've seen employers open back up. Indeed, which is a online job board, has seen job postings go through the roof. More and more positions are hiring, more and more people are coming open. More jobs are going to be available. But here's the thing, the jobs aren't going to be the same. Why? Well, one of the things I need you to know that our research has shown to us about this pandemic is what it is and what it isn't in terms of impacting the job market in the future. We say oftentimes that this year has been unprecedented. Well, what our studies have shown, what the research has out there, is that 2020 was not unprecedented. What it was an accelerator. Now, there are some things that are unprecedented, though. If you look at the number of times the word unprecedented got searched in Google worldwide, you can see it spiked. It goes through the roof. It's an unprecedented search of the word unprecedented. But the reality is, what the coronavirus pandemic was for us globally, more than anything else, was an accelerant. It simply accelerated trends that were already happening. Think of it like this guy. He sees a fire pit. It's already going. He wants to make it get going a little bit more. So he takes a liter of gasoline and pours it onto the fire. And is not too surprisingly, it then blows up in his face. That's what 2020 was. It's an accelerant to trends that were already happening. And the global workplace is no different. It was already estimated that 85% of the jobs we'd be doing in 2030 hadn't even been invented yet. More importantly, new jobs are coming in, but old ones are going away, right? When you look globally, right, what are the probability that certain jobs will be replaced by robots or technology? Certain jobs are nearly 100% gone. Telemarketers, accountants, and auditors. And in that telemarketer space, also what we're seeing is a lot of the global call centers are being replaced as well. In fact, just in India, it's estimated that the IT sector could lose 3 million low-skilled jobs, oftentimes in call centers, by the year 2022, right? That's next year. These are jobs that are going away and not coming back. Now, they'll be replaced by new jobs. We just don't always necessarily know what those new jobs are. So how do we prepare our students if we don't know what the future holds? Well, if you ask futurists, they may not know what jobs are going to be available, but they know in general what job skills will be necessary. And they created a top 10 list of skills for the future. What's number one on this list? Work ethic. That's right. Work ethic was deemed by employers as the most important skill today, and it's going to be one of the most important skills for our students in the future. So what I want to do during our time today is help you understand a little bit more about work ethic. I want to give you a better understanding of what it means. Then I want to help understand the impact of the work ethic gap. And along the way, I want to give you 5 strategies for helping to build work ethic. Now, if you're a teacher, this is something maybe you can do in your classrooms. As school administrators or leaders, these are things that we can start to incorporate every day. As parents, these are things that you can use to help develop these skills in your kids as well. These are going to be things that are just general universal ideas or concepts, things that you don't need a fancy curriculum in order to do, but things that can be embedded every day in your approach and in your philosophy. So with that, let's get started with a little work ethic 101. Let's start with the most important first question. What do you even mean with the term work ethic, right? When we think about work ethic, what is it, right? How would you define it? Now, we have almost 76 people here on the session today. I'm going to bet if I asked you to type in your definition of work ethic into the chat window, and I won't, don't worry, we would have probably more than 75 different definitions of the word work ethic. It seems like it means something different to everyone. And indeed, what we found through our research is that work ethic is not one thing. It's a series of things. It's a series of skills that can be developed. It's not one thing. In fact, we found it's 7 things. Let me give you a perfect example. A study recently was done by the Wahani Foundation asking what does work ethic mean? What are the soft skills that are most important for employers, right? They found it wasn't one skill, right? It was about communication, critical thinking, teamwork, attitudes and behaviors, an entrepreneurial mindset, problem solving, and being customer centric. These were just employers there in South Asia and India, but we see the same thing globally. We do work not only in North America, Asia, Middle East, everywhere we've been. These are the same skills that employers are demanding. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. These foundational skills are the ones that employers need more than anything else. To make them easier to remember, because these can be kind of confusing, what we've done to help our students and facilitators is to take those skills and summarize them into 7. These are the 7 skills we try and impart to our students through our curriculum. They are attitude, right? Having a positive attitude every single day. Second, attendance, making sure you're on time every time. Appearance, not just in what you wear, but how you communicate, how you interact with others. Ambition, to do more than the bare minimum to get by. Acceptance of other people, of the rules. Appreciation of the people you work with and for. And accountability, to do what you say you're going to do every single day. Now, you don't have to use these 7. We just like them because they're easy to remember. And we put them all together in a little something that we call Bring Your A Game, because they all start with the letter A. So what we need to know as we move forward is the next really important question, right? What is it with kids these days? Do they have the same work ethic that we did? What is with this next generation? And that's particularly important in India, right? We know this. The growth of the youth in India is huge, unmatched almost virtually by anywhere else in the world. This young demographic growing up is critical to the success of the future of India. We have to get with these youth today because they represent such a huge portion of the population, right? And I don't know what it is with kids. Here in America, we have the same problem, right? We've seen this. And they talk about this me generation. There's something about young people, right? They're lazy, entitled, right? All these awful things we say about young people. And what's interesting is when you start to do some research around skills around young people and about attitudes, you see a very similar message emerge over time. Here's something that was written about young people, right? They love luxury. They show disrespect for their elders, their tyrants, right? That's my favorite at the end, right? They tyrannize their teachers. Well, that may not be true entirely, but certainly this mindset about young people is very true. But what's interesting to look at is this quotation. This quotation isn't new. In fact, here's the thing. It was actually written and attributed to Socrates, an ancient Greek philosopher. This idea that young people have disrespect or don't know what they're doing or are ruining things is not a new philosophy. It's something that we always attribute to young people. The reality is, what we find more than anything else, this attitude that young people don't know what they're doing stays over time. But the skills, this attitude around work is not necessarily something that is impacted by age. In fact, here's a study that was done in North America comparing work ethic of the three main generations in our workplace. And what it found is that there was no statistically significant difference in the work ethic of any one of the three main generations. In fact, what it found is that overall, and this is a meta study, so it's a study of 77 different studies by the Journal of Business and Psychology, is that everyone was about the same. The challenges that we have around work ethic are not generational, they're societal. What we find is that the attitudes around work are not limited to a particular age group, they're more about everyone and cultural. And that's why we have to address those no matter where we are around the globe. That leads us to the third question I want to ask. Can you teach work ethic? Is work ethic a skill that you can develop later on, right? Once you get beyond 4 or 5. Well, here's the good news. When it comes to teaching work ethic, there's a simple answer. The answer is yes. Yes, you can teach these skills. But what I want to tell you is that you can't teach work ethic the way we think we can sometimes. We oftentimes try and teach these skills to people by pointing fingers and telling people what not to do. You can't do this. You need to show up on time. You need to do this. And we penalize people when they don't do it. The reality is you can't penalize people into teaching them work ethic. That approach does not work. So let me give you, this is going to be strategy number 1. I told you we're going to have 5 today. Here is going to be strategy number 1. We need to start focusing on our learners' WIIFM. What is WIIFM? Well, you can call it WIFM, but it's not new. It's a concept that we love, though. It stands for what's in it for me. This is a simple philosophy change. Instead of trying to get people to learn these work ethic skills because it's important to other people, we have to help our students understand why it's important to them. When they start to realize what's in it for them, why they should care, that's when the magic happens. Why? Because when people get internalized, when it becomes part of who they are, their heart drives their head. Instead of starting with your head and trying to deal with consequences, we need to get involved emotionally. And that happens when we help students understand why these skills matter to them. Why should it matter for you to have a more positive attitude? Why is being on time matter to you, not to your boss? When students understand that, that's when they get motivated. That's when behaviors change. But we need to remember this. Every single student we work with is motivated. But people do things for their reasons, not for ours. We oftentimes try and motivate people in the way that works for us. And that approach is unsuccessful. Teaching work ethic requires us to help our students understand why it matters to them. And when they do that, that's when the magic happens. So if we can teach work ethic, if it's not a generational problem, let me ask you this. Is there a work ethic gap there in India? Well, unfortunately, here's what I'm going to tell you. All of the research points to yes. Right? If we just look at some different studies, right? This is from the India Skills Report, looking at young people in India and their overall employability. What we've seen is over the last 3 years, there's been a significant drop in employability among young people in India. Right now, we're dropping almost below 45% employability. What is it? Right? 92% of full-time employees in India agree there is a skills gap in the country, and 76% feel personally affected by that. Where is the skills gap? More often than not, it's in soft skills. India ranks 67th globally in the development of these soft skills, it's work ethic skills, right? And what we've seen is that learners have to invest in both those. There's such an emphasis around academic and technical skills, but what we need to realize is that to compete in the global workplace, what we have to do is focus not just on the technical skills, but the soft skills, because that's what will make us successful. That's what will make our students employable. If there's one thing we've learned during the pandemic, is that truly the world has gotten more global. We are now competing, not just locally, but globally for employment. And if we want our students to be successful in that marketplace, we have to make sure that they have technical and soft skills, right? UNICEF just looked at the percentage of young people who were unprepared for soft skills, and they found a full 54% of young people in India did not have the global skills necessary, the 21st century skills, in order to be prepared. This is a problem. But you, as educators, you have that opportunity. As administrators, as parents, we have the chance. We have the opportunity. What we have to be doing, though, is being intentional about the development of these skills. We've gotten better about academic skills and some of these technical skills. But one of the things that you're doing already by being a part of the program is starting to look at these career development. What is it that we need to do? And that's why we're here today. Because the reality is this skills gap, it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And the impact of the lack of these skills is going to impact all of us. So let's start with one of the places where we see this lack of work ethic having a huge impact. This is one example. This comes from data out of the United States. But this is in general about work ethic and these non-cognitive soft skills. What we found is that there's a direct correlation between students who have higher non-cognitive skills, higher soft skills, and their graduation rates from both secondary and post-secondary education. That should come as no surprise, because while we call these skills work ethic, the reality is those 7 A's, right? Attitude, attendance, appearance, ambition, acceptance, appreciation, and accountability help students be successful in their academic world as well as the work world. Right? What are the challenges? What's the impact of this lack of skills, the skills gap that we see in India? Let's talk about how it impacts the workplace. This is a study that was done asking adults in India, how important is it for you to report to work on time every day? 2/3 said, yes, it was important to work on time every day, meaning a full 1/3 didn't, right? 18% said it was important to be there on time only on days when there's a meeting or a deadline to get done. 5% of you said it's only important for junior or trainees to report on time, right? 5%. Otherwise, if you're not a junior or a trainee, you don't need to be there on time, right? This is a really profound impact in terms of timeliness. And again, talking about how this is a cultural piece. It's not just something with young people. It's something that we have to overcome because these are real problems. How does that manifest itself? We talked about lack of employment. A full 80% of Indian engineering graduates felt that they were unfit to be employed. And again, this is not just a local problem. This is a global problem because what we're finding again, one of the challenges that we see in India, as we see other places, is this idea of brain drain, where the best educated, the best leave the country. We can stay now and compete in a global workforce, but only if we're prepared, right? Because one of the major reasons why they lacked those employability skills was because they didn't have the soft skills. It wasn't that Indian engineers didn't have the technical skills. It was about soft skills, right? Looking again at the impact culturally, how many hours a day is it okay to waste time at work, right? Ranged from an hour, 38%, a full, right? A little over 1/3 of the workplace sees no harm whatsoever in wasting time at work as long as they get all their duties done. Now, that may be true in certain workplace environments, but that attitude around work has a distinct impact, right? When we look at how it goes, these soft skills, these work ethic skills are becoming more and more important in the hiring process, right? We already told you, education was no longer a deciding factor. It was just a price of entry. Globally, 93% of hiring managers now see work ethic and soft skills as being as important or more important than technical skills. What does that mean? That means if you go the inverse of that, only 7% of managers around the world, hiring managers, said that soft skills are not important. So what we're seeing is the vast majority firmly believe that there has to be a balance between those skills. And that is important. When conducting interviews for jobs, there's a disconnect though. And this is one of the challenges that we have. 93% of employers said it's important for a job candidate to demonstrate soft skills like work ethic in the interview process. But then we asked those same job seekers. Only 16% of job seekers think that it's important to demonstrate soft skills in the workplace. Why is that? One of the challenges is that we, when we're doing career counseling, focus so much on resumes and resumes and resumes, and we don't focus enough on what you need to demonstrate in an interview. We can help our students with this because this is really causing a problem. But when employers hire someone, the reality is not everyone works out. Some people are bad hires. Why are they bad hires? 92% of the time, it's because they lack soft skills. It's not because they don't have the technical skills to get the job done. 92% of the time. You consistently see these same numbers, right? It's around 92, 93%. That's a vast super majority. These skills are critically important. So why do we have this problem? Well, one of the challenges is when we look at the skills themselves, we don't do a very good job of teaching them, of discussing them. Why? Because we call them soft skills, right? We think that they're, just these things you should have, right? I don't know them, but I know them when I don't see them. The challenge we have is that soft skills don't get the attention of academic and technical skills. So let's stop being soft. That's going to be strategy number 2. Stop pretending like soft skills aren't important. Stop pretending like they're just there. We have to treat them the same way we do other skills. And with that in mind, we have to clearly define what we want them to be and what the outcomes are. How does that start? Well, it starts by coming up with significant definitions for each of the skills. We don't always do that. Let's give you a good example. Attitude, right? What do we just tell people all the time, you need to have a better attitude at work. And then they don't know what that means. We don't know what that means. So let's clearly define what that skill is. So for us, for instance, attitude is about staying positive in every situation, taking control of the way you react. How do I know you have a positive attitude or don't? It's whether or not you take control. Does something bad that happened this morning impact you in the afternoon? If the answer is yes, you're not taking control of the way you react. You're letting it control you. What we have to do with all of these soft skills is define them the same way we do all of our technical and academic skills. Because when we define a skill, that's when our students can develop them. That's when they can demonstrate them. The Center for Work Ethic Development, we have clearly defined each one of those 7 skills. I'll tell you later where we can get those definitions that you can use to help clearly define those skills so your students can develop them and then demonstrate them in the real world. Because without those definitions, they're soft, and that won't help our students. When it comes to development of soft skills, one of the things I really want to emphasize is that it's not an either-or approach. What we need to do is focus on all 3, academic, technical, and soft skills. Why? Because if we don't get all 3, we're not truly preparing our students. One of the challenges and why I think we have such a problem with employability is right now we're spending so much time in education focused just on academic and technical skills. So what are we putting out? People with potential. Why only potential? Because oftentimes they're not able to get and keep employment because they don't have the soft skills necessary. What if we focus on academic and soft skills, but don't do any technical skill training? What are we doing then? Well, we're producing nice people. Nice people are great to go have some tea with, but they're not great employees. What about technical and soft skills, but we ignore academic skills? That doesn't help either. We create bulls who charge in, destroy things. Yeah, maybe they get some things done, but they're not sustainable. What we have to do is focus on all three. That sweet spot in the middle is where we create students that are truly career ready. And that really is our objective more than anything else. Not just students who can graduate, not just students who are there. We want them to be successful. In order to do that, they need to focus on all three. More importantly, when you look at long-term success, what is it driven by? Well, a study done by Harvard University here in the United States and replicated by Stanford University found this. 85% of our job success comes from having well-developed soft skills and people skills. Only 15% came from technical skills and knowledge. If we want our students to be successful in the long term, what we need to help them do is develop a well-rounded skill set that puts an emphasis around these soft skills, this work ethic that we know is so critical. So I've already given you two strategies for developing these skills. The first, right, was to change our philosophy to focus on WIIFM, right? What's in it for me? Focusing on the learner, on the student, on why it matters to them. The second was to stop being soft with these skills, to stop letting them be undefined. Instead, clearly set expectations, define what the skill is, define what the behaviors are. That will make you successful. Now, let's get to the last three strategies for developing work ethic in your students. I want to go with number 3 right now, and this one is very important. What you have to do with your students and with yourself is to build awareness, to help them better understand what we mean when we talk about work ethic and soft skills. Because if we don't define it, we run into a real challenge. So let me give you an example of this. This was a study that was done with 6,000 young people in the workplace, asking them a simple question. At work, do any of these things describe you? Are you people savvy? Are you technically savvy? Are you loyal to your employer? Are you fun-loving? Or are you hardworking? And this is the percentage of young people who said yes to each of those. The number one thing that young people said they were was hardworking. The next highest, loyal to their employer. The lowest was fun-loving. Well, that's interesting. But what really makes this study interesting was the same group of people, their bosses were asked to evaluate them. Their answers don't exactly match. In fact, you could say there's a significant difference between where our employees, our young employees think they are, and where our managers, our bosses think they are, right? Young people, 86% of themselves think of themselves as hardworking. Their bosses, only 11% of them think they're actually hardworking. Loyal to their employer, 82 goes to 1%. There is a significant gap here. And why is that? This is not unique to one particular profession or one particular part of the world. No, this is a really important concept. Now, this is a perfect example of it. This is the Dunning-Kruger Effect. It's been research that's been done around skill development. And here is what it shows you, right? The least amount of knowledge that you have in a particular field or area, ironically enough, your confidence in how well you do it is sky high. Simply put, you don't know what you don't know, right? What we see is that as you get more knowledge, what ends up happening is you realize it's not as easy as you thought it was, and your confidence actually comes down. People who don't think they're as good at some of these skills actually are better because they realize how difficult it can be to do these things all the time, right? You get to that next phase, right, where you realize there's more to it than you think. Then the problem is you get to this lower part And you say, I'm never going to understand this, because you realize it's a lot harder than you thought. But if you keep working, if we keep developing these skills in our students, you get to the next phase, right? Where it starts to make sense. And then they start to get good because they realize how complicated or challenging these things are. The problem for us is that so many people lack basic awareness. And because of that, they think they're great, right? Their confidence is right up there at the top. What we need to realize is that this has to be overcome. And that unfortunately, when it comes to work ethic, right, most of our students are like this, right? They're the cat that looks into the mirror and sees a lion on the other side. Why? And this is an important piece, because we judge our work ethic based on our intentions, and other people base it on our actions. Without proper awareness, our intentions don't necessarily meet the objective, right? If we don't know what we don't know, our intentions are that we're going to be good, but we don't know how to fulfill them. We have to create awareness in our students. We have to help them understand that they're not necessarily as good as they think they are because they don't know what they don't know. The next thing I want to focus on is an idea or concept called discovery. Discovery is really important in developing soft skills, especially developing soft skills in our older students. Why? People don't like to be lectured at. People don't like to be told what to do. It's just part of human nature. We'll do it, but we don't like to. In fact, more often than not, if you try and press something on someone, they'll come up with reasons why it isn't true. Instead of that approach, what we want to do is allow people to discover things on their own, to allow people to uncover their own facts. When we allow people to own that learning, when they uncover why these things are important, that's when it becomes internalized. Not pushing things on people, but allowing them to uncover things on their own. This is powerful because unfortunately, most of us have an unconscious bias. That is, we tend to only see things we agree with, and until we're allowed to discover new things. Let me give you a perfect example of this in my life. So I grew up here in the United States of America in the middle of the country. We did not go to the ocean. We did not go to the beach. We didn't do any of those things. It was just my parents didn't have money. We didn't do those kinds of activities. Where I learned about the ocean was from watching movies. And one of the early movies I watched about the ocean was a movie called Jaws. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen or remember the American movie Jaws, but it was a movie all about sharks. And in particular, one ginormous shark that was killing people. That's all I knew. And so to this day, sharks scare me. I don't know if anyone else out there, but sharks, I hate them. I hate the concept of them. And in fact, now that I am able to go to the ocean, I don't go in. Well, I won't go in any deeper than my knees. Why? Because I'm scared of these things. They are out there and they are killing people, right? Sharks are dangerous. And so I don't get in the ocean, right? Or at least I thought they were dangerous. Now, what's interesting, I started to do a little bit of research. I've gotten very research driven. And so I started to look up shark deaths. Now, there were a host of shark attacks off the coast of America last year. And I was really curious, how many people die of shark attacks every year? You know what's interesting? Do you know how many people worldwide died from shark attacks the last year they have record? Well, let me tell you, it's a very low number. It's 8. Do you know what killed more people than shark attacks worldwide? Selfies. Yes, people taking selfies died at a more frequent rate than people being killed by sharks. I found that impossible to believe, but then I started to look at it, right? 8 shark attack deaths worldwide, 28 people died taking selfies. And you know what's scarier? The number of selfie deaths around the world continues to go up year after year. We're doing stupider and stupider things when we take our selfies. In fact, it's gotten so bad there in India, right? There's a whole campaign around where not to take selfies. Now, what's interesting about this, I found it to be funny at first. Then I started to think about my own life. And I realized, well, while maybe it wasn't taking selfies that was so dangerous, I started to think about the times when I had my mobile phone out, when I was walking and wasn't paying attention. There was one time I was out walking with my mobile phone and I was looking at it and I'd stopped because there was a message that I was replying to. And in that message, I needed to spend more time typing. So I had to sort of stop and think and type it. And as soon as I'd stopped, no more than 5 seconds after that, a bus went straight in front of my face. I wasn't paying any attention. If I hadn't stopped to take a look at my phone and actually type something into it, if I just kept staring at it, I may have walked into the street and gotten hit by that bus. I think about the times when I'm driving a car and I'm looking at my phone. What I started to discover was that sharks maybe aren't that dangerous, but that technology, that smartphone that I have in my hand is. But it wasn't because of a sign. It wasn't because of a movie. It's because I was allowed to discover it. I now realize that my phone is probably more dangerous than a shark attack. And what I should be doing is pay more attention to the real world and not to my phone. But that didn't happen because of some sign or some poster. That happened because of an experience in my life, because I was allowed to discover it. Help our students, not lecture them, but discover. Ask the question, why? Why is this important to you? Why do you think it's important to others? Why? When you start to allow them to do that, instead of telling them, when you ask instead of tell, that's when the discovery happens. That's when students own their own learning. The fifth strategy I want to give you today is a different one. It's about then the development of these skills. So often when we talk about this, students try and be everything all the time, right? As soon as they know what that expectation is. But the reality is this: no one is going to change their behavior overnight. No one is going to become superhuman the next day. Let me put this in perspective. I know you guys don't know who I am, but I used to be a long distance runner. I still do some running now, but not as much as I used to. One of the races that I ran is a marathon, right? Marathons are crazy races, right? They take on average about 4 hours to complete of straight running. You train for 16 weeks for this race. And oftentimes you do long training runs of up to 20 miles, which is about 30 some kilometers every single weekend. It's a massive deal. I ask people all the time, do you want to go run a marathon? Most of the time they say, no, I do not want to go run a marathon. That is far too far. But would they go do a 1 kilometer jog? Yeah, they could go 1 kilometer, right? What's the difference? Huge, right? The reality is, the bigger the gap between where a person starts and where they see that final goal, the bigger that gap is, the less likely we are to even get started. And it doesn't matter what goal you're working on. This is human behavior. If something seems so far away, we're unlikely to even get started. If we tell our students that the gap between where they are and where they need to be is so big, then won't even try. Instead, what we need to be doing is focusing on small incremental improvements. What do we need to do? We need to think about a 1% improvement. Instead of trying to make our students change overnight, ask them this: could you be 1% better tomorrow than you are today? Could you have 1% better attendance, a 1% better attitude? Most people would say, yes, I can definitely do that, right? I could be 1% better. I don't need to be superhuman. I could be 1%. If we can get our students every day to be slightly better over time, that has a huge impact. Right? When we look at this, if you are 1% better every day for 40 days, what impact does that have? Well, you might think that's a 40% improvement, right? Because it's 1% every day. But using compound interest, that 1% of the 1% goes all the way up. And by the end of 40 days, you're actually 120% better. Right? Small incremental improvements make a big difference. And sometimes even a 1% change can be a big deal. For those of you who are out there who teach English or know about this, right? English is a perfect example. Let me use this sentence. I love cooking, my children, and animals. Now, in English grammar, right, those are three separate things, right? This person loves to cook, they love their own children, and they love animals. But if we make just a very tiny 1% change to that grammar, if we get rid of those two commas, now what happens? Instead of being three different things, it's all one sentence. And now this person loves to cook their own children and animals. Now we've gone from a very nice person to someone who is cannibalizing their own children. A very, very difference, right? We know that a 1% change over time can make a difference, but sometimes even a 1% change in itself can make a difference. As we look at the future, a post-pandemic global world, we know as a nation, we're not doing a good job of having our students be prepared, in particular around these soft skills, these work ethic skills. So we need to help them. And I've given you today 5 strategies that you can use to help develop these skills. First of all, we again need to focus on WIIFM. What's in it for me? Why should they care? That shift in approach. Secondly, we have to stop being soft. Stop pretending that these soft skills aren't important, but we need to clearly define them in the same way that we do our academic and technical skills. Third, we have to help build awareness in our students, because if we simply tell them to have work ethic, they'll think they're great. We have to clearly outline and explain to them exactly where it is, and know that as soon as people start to know more, they're going to realize they're not as good and that this dip in confidence is expected. Next, we need to allow for discovery. We have to help our students uncover these things on their own. Stop giving them the answers and instead ask the questions that help them uncover this on their own. And finally, use the 1% approach. Focus on small incremental improvements. Little things over time can make a big difference and add up. They don't have to do it overnight. Earlier, I talked about the definitions of the 7 A's, right? Attitude, attendance, appearance, ambition, acceptance, appreciation, and accountability. If you want to know more about those, if you want to sign up for weekly work ethic tips, if you want to know more about our curricula, about how you can use it, our research, simply go to www.workethic.org. There, you will find all sorts of different resources that you can access, all sorts of different things you can use to help your students develop the skills necessary. Now, I promised you before that I was going to give you 5 strategies, but I want to give you a 6th strategy. It's about being the change. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. What I want you to do, take a look at me here. All right. I know you all don't have your cameras on, and that's fine, but I want you to look at me here on the screen, and I want you to follow along with me real quick. Wherever you are, what I'd like you to do is take your hand and put it up to the screen. Okay? I'd like you to wiggle your fingers for me. Now, take your hand, go to the left, the right. All right, we're waving our hands down. Now take your hand and make a little O with it, right? Just like this, all right? Take that O for me, all right? Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take that circle and put it on your chin, okay? Now, what I'd like you to notice is how many of you have your hand on your cheek and not on your chin. I can't tell, but I'm going to guess a lot of you probably had your hand on your cheek. Why? Because you were watching me, right? You, more than anything else, follow what someone does. And I think that's probably one of the most critical skills that we can have in terms of a strategy for developing these skills. And that's this. You have to do what you want your students to do. We have to make sure that we're modeling these behaviors, that we're not just out there talking the talk, but that we follow through ourselves and that we demonstrate these 7 skills every single day, that we do what we say we're going to do. We bring that positive attitude, right? That's what's most important, right? Be the change, as Gandhi says, you want to be in this world. Arun, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with your global educators this morning. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I know this past year has not been what anyone expected. But as we come out of this global pandemic, as we start to get on the other side, we know our students are going to need more skills in order to be successful in this global marketplace. And soft skills are a way to start. And you, through your work, are helping do that today. Thank you. And to all of you educators out there, thank you, and bring your A game.